Welcome to session 15. Welcome to the bonus workshop on electric guitars. Let's look at what we learned this session. We talked about types of electric guitars. I showed you all kinds of different guitars. We talked about guitar pickups, single coils, humbuckings. We learned about power chords. We learned a little bit about other styles of playing, country guitar playing, a little about R&B and funk guitar playing, and we talked about guitar effects. Now, the most important skills I want you to be able to come away from this session, I want you to gain a familiarity with these various types of electric guitars. It's important for you to know how a Strat sounds, how a Les Paul sounds, how a Tele sounds. I need you to learn these power chord forms. These are something that you're going to be expected to know as a guitar player. I need you to understand the basic aspects of a variety of different guitar styles. I'm not necessarily a country player, but I know a few country licks, and I can generally fake it through that situation if I need to. I'm not necessarily a full-out rock player, but yet I know enough rock things to be able to fluff my way through it. I need you to be able to gain familiarity with guitar effects. What do they do? You may not be a player that uses a lot of effects, or you may be interested in starting to add effects into your playing. You need to get a familiarity with what these effects do. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with power chords. Power chords are chords that only use the root and fifth steps of the major scale. We've dealt with triads and seventh chords, all kinds of different types of those. Now we're going to kind of go the other way with power chords, and we're going to take out the third. I showed you some movable forms and some common open forms. Let's go through those briefly. The six-string movable form for a power chord, let's do it on this F here. We have an F, a C, and an F. Now, I don't play those last three strings. See how those have X's by it? You can pivot this around in different ways. Like if I wanted to put it on different spots of the neck, there's an A power chord, G power chord, B. Let's do the fifth string version. The fifth string version is on a B. Let's do that on a B tonality. Now I can play two strings or three strings, however I wanted to do it. And again, here's my pivot note right here on the fifth string. I can even add, I can do the the three-string version. I can even add the lower fifth here, making it a four-string chord. Kind of gets a real growly sound. Let me kick on a little distortion. I'm using the fifth string power chord, but I'm kind of half barring that and getting that low fifth in there. It's a very growly sound. Let's go through some of the open forms of these power chords. Let me kick off my distortion again. Here's an E power chord in an open voicing. It's these lower three strings. What about the next one? On A, you can even do this. It's just a chord without the third. A G power chord would be like that. Again, muting that muting that fifth string. For the next one, I have a D power chord. Now I can do 2-3. Let me do 2-3 there. If I wanted to add the upper fifth on it, I end up with a very open sounding chord, and I go all the way up there for that. Now I gave you a couple of practice exercises on these various forms on page 80 and 81 in your book. Let's get a little bit more practice with these. We're going to be working through the bonus workshop exercises for session 15. These are the power chord exercises. Once again, these and other resources are available to you where? At learnandmasterguitar.com/resources. So let's take a look at these power chord bonus exercises. We're going to start off with number 1. Let's look at it first. Let's be good musicians and look at what we're doing here. We have a D5. Remember how we notate power chords with a 5 on the top there? We have a D5, a C5, and a G5, and then a couple of single notes after that. So we have the D, C, G, and then the single notes. All right, here we go, the D5. 1, 2, ready, go. 4, G5, 4, 1. Do it again. You gotta have to kind of dig in on these chords. Do it again. Maybe I can do octaves there. That sounds hip. Let's turn on a little distortion and see what it sounds like. 1, 2, number 1, and go. Doesn't sound half bad. Let's go on to number 2. Now, number 2, let me kick off my distortion here. Number 2, I want you to kind of do the chicken picking clawing thing on this one. We have our power chord on that C, but I'm going to play it with my pick and my second and third finger coming up in my hand. And I'm going to take my third and fourth finger off, catch this bar here. I'm going to bar that and bring these back on. Does it again. Now I just move everything down a string. We do that again. See how that works? Let's do it nice and slow. Number 2. 1, 2, number 2, and slow, go. And then it does it again. Takes a little bit of practice there. Do it again, ready, go. G5. Very good. Now take a look at the next one. This is number 3 of your power chord bonus exercises. Look at that. Look how fast those chords come. I have an E flat, a B flat, an A flat, and another B flat. Okay, these are coming right after each other. Let's try our muting technique that we've learned. Remember how we put our palm down here on these strings? We'll go real slowly. Ready, go. E flat, E flat. Just keep jumping on it. Let's slow it down a little bit. Make sure you're getting a good muting sound there. And then let's resolve it. Let me kick on a little delay here, a little slap back delay. Let me adjust that real quick. All right, now I'm going to play the same thing again. See how the sound changes. Ready, go. Hear how that little bit of a slap back delay gives it a very unique sound. Let's go to the fourth one. Now I'm mixing the power chords with a regular chord. You have that D minor 7th in the second bar. Now that's a full out, 5th string bar of a D minor 7th. Let's take a look at this rhythm really slowly, starting in the first measure of number 4. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and... B flat. See how that's anticipated? F. D minor. B flat. We can also add 2 chords on that. Let's see if I wanted to do 2 chords. F5, that would be normal. D minor 7, but then I could do it maybe an E flat 2 there. Sometimes the E flat power chords, the 5 power chords and 2 chords are very closely related because they don't have that third, so I can interchange them. So I could do an E flat 2 on that, a B flat 2, going back to the F5. Let's see how that would sound. Ready, go. E flat 2. All right, let's kick on a little distortion. Play it one more time. 1, 2, number 4, go. A little bit faster. Kick on a little bit of delay here. See how that works? Turn all this stuff off. Now we're going to talk about the harmonized major scale. This is a critical point for you to understand some musical theory. We've jumped off of intervals, we've learned our scales, now we're going to start getting into chords and how they relate to each other. Let's talk about the harmonized major scale. The harmonized major scale is a specific pattern of chords that are derived from the major scale. I take a major scale and I add 2/3 on top of each one of the steps of the major scale, and I end up in the same key, and I end up with a specific pattern of chords. A specific pattern of chords. Let's look at them. The 1 chord is major. The 2 chord is minor. The 3 chord is minor. The 4 chord is major. The 5 chord is major. The 6 chord is minor. The 7 chord ends up being a diminished. We kind of talked about that in the session. So what did we end up with? What are major chords? In the harmonized major scale, the 1, the 4, and the 5 end up being major chords. Well, what are the minor chords? Well, the minor chords end up being the ones built off the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 6th. The only odd one is that number 7. So in any key, this is big, in any key, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord are going to be major. And in any key, the 2nd, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord are going to be minor, and the 7th chord is going to be a diminished. So let's get a little bit of practice about this. This pattern is consistent in every key. So let's talk through some examples. In C, the 1, 4, and 5 chords are major. So what chords would that be? C, F, and G. In F, what chords are major? The 1, 4, and 5. In F, that would be F, B flat, and C. Let's get some more practice on how this works. So if I'm in C, I'll just ask you some questions. If I'm in C, what is the 4 chord? Now you need to do a little bit of calculations. The 4 chord is one of our major chords, so count it up. C, D, E, F. The 4 chord in C is an F major. See how that works? Let's do another one. If I'm in F, what is the 3 chord? Well, the 3 chord's a minor chord. F, G, A minor is what the 3 chord would end up being. If I'm in B flat, let's do the 5 chord. What would that be? Think it out. Is it major or minor or even diminished? 5 chord is major, so we have to go from B flat, count up 5, B flat, C, D, E flat, F. The 5 chord in B flat is an F major. If I'm in D, the 6 chord is what? Think it out. I won't help you on this one. The 6 chord is a B minor. There you go. Now let me ask it to you a completely different way. B minor is the 6th chord of what key? Now I'm reversing it and I'm making you figure out what key and how these chords work together. B minor is the 6th chord in what key? Well, that would be D. See how that works? C is the 4 chord in what key? I'll give you a second to think it out. C major is the 4 chord in what key? So you got to think backwards now. C, B, A, G. The key of G, C is the 4 chord. A minor is the 6th chord in what key? Think it out. That would be C. A minor is the 6th chord in the key of C. Now, let me throw another wrench at you. What 3 A minor, let me say it to you this way. A minor is in 3 different keys because it's a minor chord. What 3 keys is A minor in? Well, in C, A minor is the 6th chord. In G, A minor is the 2nd chord. In F, A minor is the 3rd chord. There's 3 different places a minor chord could be, 2nd, 3rd, and 6th. That's why A minor can be in all 3 of those keys. See how that works? If I learn an A minor arpeggio, that'll work in 3 different keys. Oh my goodness, do you see the possibilities here? Again, guitarists are lazy. We want things that combine multiple uses. That's where this comes into play. There are many other resources for all of this in your bonus materials. There's a whole worksheet on all this stuff. I would encourage you to go through it, learn it, see how these chords relate to each other. That's going to be very important coming in the next sessions. Okay, now let's move on to a song. I want you to look on page 84 in your book to a song, Power Chord Rock. Let's get a little bit of practice with these power chords that we've been learning. I didn't rotate it, I notated it as in the tab as well, so you can get an idea of where I'm playing these positions at. So we went back to tab here for a little bit. We're just going to do 2-note versions of this, and I want to show you a little common little variation that we have with power chords. Look at that first measure. Wow, look what I have to do with my pinky. A big stretch. But again, it's a very common thing on guitar. Then we go to D, up here to D, and I do the same thing. Then I go to a kind of an E minor. And I do my... Remember how we talked about that's a characteristic thing to do with minor chords? Keep the bar down, put these back on. Then I go back down to C5. Now I'm going to the second line. Back up to D5. Look how I'm picking that. I hit the E and a 4, then I hit it again. Kind of tricky to get that. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4. E, chord. One more time. 2, 3, 4. E, chord, bar, chord. Then we go back to the C. Or, sorry. Real characteristic little 80s rock lick. So if I put it all together, that's the first 2 lines. Then it repeats back. So let's do that first line again. Oh, sorry, let me count you off. Ready, go. Up to D. Chord, bar, chord. Let's go to line 3. Rest, rest. Repeat. And 2 and 3 and... Rest. Very good. Let me kick on my distortion a little bit. We'll fire up the track, and let's play a little bit. Rest, rest. Ah, screwed up there. Rest, rest. Top. Back to line 1. Line 3. Rest, rest. Back to line 3. Rest, rest. All right, add a little bit there. That's how that goes. Let's take a look at the next song, which is Power Riffs. This is page 84 in your book, CD 4, track 10 on your Jam-Along CDs. Let's get a bit of practicing moving around these power chords, moving them all around. Take a look at that first line. I have an E to a D to an E. Okay, and then I go E, D, C. See how I'm just moving it around? Line 2. Does it again. Then it repeats back to line 1. Line 2. This one's pretty simple. Let me also mention, when you're playing these power chords, you have to kind of, with rock, you need to dig in. You can't go. It doesn't work. You got to dig in with your pick. You got to play them strong. Some songs and some ways of playing, you have to play it strong or it just doesn't work. This is one of those times. Let's move on to line 3. Line 3, we have our G power chord, F power chord, C power chord, upbeat, repeated line 3, rest, upbeat. Great. Okay, now let's play it with the track. Let me, before we do that, let me try a different distortion. Get a little bit different sound. Let me crank up my volume a little bit. All right, here we go. Repeats it back to line 1. Upbeat. Adding a little bit of slides there. Back up the top. Let me add that lower fifth on this, get that growly sound. Hear how that changes the sound? Back to line 1. G5. Choke it off. All right, let's stop. When you're playing through these things, you'll notice I did a whole bunch of little techniques. One of them is all these little whoops and slides and all that sort of stuff, very characteristic in rock playing. Look what I'm doing there. I'm muting with this hand, and I'm still playing with this hand. Get all these other little pops and clicks in there by just muting those strings and keeping that rhythm going. Next bar. Now, I'm not really particularly caring where I'm at up here. I'm just kind of giving that fall to it. Oh, look, here's a little lick you can do. I have a C, Then I come up here, get the rest of the triad. Even go up to the full third if I want to. Works on these 5th string ones. If I did it in D, I can do it a little bit on the 6th string ones, but it doesn't work out quite as well. All these little tricks you can do in C. All these little ways you can get little riffs and things out of these rock playing. Okay? That's power riffs. Let me encourage you a little bit. We've gone through a lot of different styles and techniques, and I've kind of noodled around a little bit with some of this rock stuff. The thing I want to encourage you about today is experiment with your playing. You'll notice even the last stuff that I did, don't just take it so rigid as, oh, well, the only way I can play a power chord is like this. Well, there's other things you can do with it. Toward the end, we were doing the other little licks. Experiment around. See what sounds good. If a power chord is just root, 5th, and root, well, then I could do the same thing up here. 5th, root, 5th, root, if I'm in C. Well, would that work for a C power chord? Yes, it would. Gets a little bit of different sound. Let's see what I could do with that. There's a way of doing it on the inner strings. If I wanted to go to a G, this would be a D and a G and a D and a G, root and 5th. See how it gets a little bit of a different sound. I don't always have to strum it. I could maybe pick it. I could do it picking. I could do it up with my 2nd and 3rd finger. That's what makes good little rock riff licks, is you experiment around. Everybody can do this. So try and spin something else out of it. Now all I was thinking there is, how can I keep the C, hit these chords, and still keep that C down there? So I got to kind of think how I can finger that. You just experiment around. Now, real hip thing to do these days is to do all downstrokes. Let's say I'm up here. I can get a lot of good motion out of doing basically a power chord. This would be like a B flat power chord. Let me move it down here to G. D, G, and D. Let's say we're coming around to a chorus and I want to make it big. I just start doing all downstrokes and I move my fingers around occasionally. See how that works? I created a good, interesting riff that's going to stick out in the mix, and it's nothing to play it on guitar. I'm just moving it around. Doesn't sound half bad if I just play it kind of muted off. Sorry. I can do all kinds of things with it. Experiment with your playing. Take a few minutes. Just kick on the distortion, kick on some delay, crank it up nice and loud, shut the doors, and experiment with your playing. You'll be amazed at all the fun things that can come out of your playing just by doing that. We'll see you next time. Okay, now let me give you some tips for this session that we've covered here on rock and roll, electric guitars, session 15. First thing I want you to keep in mind is incorporate power chords into your playing. It does you no good just to kind of practice these in your bedroom, on your couch, and you kind of go, okay, I've got the forms. Okay, well, the forms are great and all, but you need to be able to incorporate that into your playing. That's where the learning actually becomes something that you can now have in your arsenal of tools in your tool belt, be able to whip out. So don't just get the forms, go the next step of being able to incorporate it in your playing. Second thing I want you to work on is practice with effects. Experiment with different effects. How does something sound with an effect versus another effect? Let's say I take a simple little power chord, C power chord. That's just my guitar dry right there. Well, if I add a little delay, that's kind of cool. What if I added a little distortion? Changes the sound. What if I change my pickup? Let me go to the neck pickup. A little bit of a warmer sound. What if I do the middle pickup? A little bit more mid-rangey, all the way to the bottom. A little edgier. So I'm experimenting around. Let me use another distortion, see what that sounds like. Very different sound. Different distortions give you different sounds. What if I use my chorus pedal? Different thing. What if I used a chorus and a distortion? Experiment with different effects. Don't just use your effect one way. Mix them, combine them, get some different things happen with them. Keep up the great work. We'll see you next time. For this session, you're ready to move on when you can play all of the power chords, the forms, and the exercises that are in the book, and the ones that are in the bonus materials. When you can play these at a moderate tempo, then you're able to move on. You've got the skills enough down to be able to move on. You're ready to move on when you've completed the Harmonized Major Scales worksheet that is in the bonus materials. I would encourage you, don't neglect this. This is going to be real important as we get into the sessions coming. When you have played through the songs and the jam-along tracks and you can keep up with them at the track tempo, then I'd say you're ready to move on. When you can do these things, then you're ready to move on to the next session where we're going to be covering strumming, advanced strumming, adding a lot of dynamic motion into your playing. I'll see you there. Okay, I wanted to take a minute and talk to you about some of the gear that I use. Now, your gear is going to look different from my gear. My gear is going to look different from the player down the street that plays. Each person's tools that they use to play with are going to be unique to that person. So I'd encourage you not to run out and buy everything that's on my pedal board. That might be the worst thing you could do. Or the amps that I use or stuff like that. Find amps, find gear, find effects that work for you. Let me just talk you through some of the things that I use to get some of the sounds that I'm going for you. First thing I'm going to talk about is my pedal board down here. This is all of my effects that I generally use for my average job that I'm playing. They're put on a pedal train board. This is this aluminum frame right here, made by a company right here in Nashville. It's aluminum. All these are attached with Velcro on the back, and they Velcro them to the thing. They are connected by these cables, which are by George L's. George L's Cables, great cable maker. I'll tell you more about those in a little bit. And I've cut each individual ones of these to make them work. I've had to kind of redo a little bit of them, so here, that one's a different one. But let me talk you through my signal and how it goes. First thing my signal is hitting in this setup is, since I've put a new pedal in here, is a Robotalk pedal, which is this guy right here. So that's my sound. Normally, when I turn this on, it works almost like a wah, but it's sensitive to the volume. So when I play hard, it opens it up. Would be good on more rhythmic parts, like something like. Anyway, just a little pedal that gives that sort of thing. Normally, my signal wouldn't go into there. It would go right into my compressor. This is a Carl Martin compressor. Have had it for years. What it does when I play, if you can see, this light comes on. That means it's compressing my signal. What it does, I really don't hear what a compressor does unless you really have it cranked up pretty hot. What it does is it makes my louds a little bit less loud, so I can still play strong, but the volume doesn't change as much. That helps the sound guys out when I'm playing at a venue or something like that. So I run through the compressor. That's always the first thing that your signal should go through. Then it goes into a distortion pedal. You want to then run into your gain type pedals, which are my distortion. This one's an Expandora pedal, which is an older pedal that I bought used, and it's good for just good old chunky distortion. The next one is this Jekyll and Hyde pedal. It's put out by Visual Sound Company right here in Spring Hill, my hometown, and here in suburb of Nashville. This has two sides to it. The red side, it's a little noisy, you can hear, is more of a Marshall stack kind of a distortion. The other side functions more like a tube screamer from Ibanez. More of a softer distortion, which it's good to use sometimes. Next, my signal goes into this processor, which is an acoustic instrument processor put out by Boss. I don't even know if you can get it anymore. But I use that because I can add a little reverb to my sound. Hear that reverb trailing off there? I can also control my inputs of volume, throw a little EQ on it and stuff there. I like it just because it gives me some control. If I want to use an acoustic guitar as well, I can plug that in here. From here, this goes into my volume pedal, which is a fun little pedal to use. Let me give a little reverb here, a little delay maybe. You can get a lot of good effects with wahs, or excuse me, with volume pedals. Turn on my chorus maybe. I did kind of a rake picking thing there where I went backwards. Sometimes on a song, if it's a softer song, you can just do color things. 3, 4. Things like that. After that, it goes into a chorus. Let's talk about my TC electronic chorus. I've had this for 15 years, never given me any problems. Here's my sound normally. Let me turn off all this other stuff. Here it is with the chorus. Hear how that opens up the sound so much? I can also use a flanger, which I don't use very much. Very different sound. From there, it goes into a delay, which we talked about a little bit in the session. This is a regular old Boss delay. It just gives a little fullness to your sound. After that, it goes into a tremolo. I don't use that very much. It's good maybe on country things. A little bit of a tremolo effect. The last thing in my signal chain is this MXR gate, which is a very important little piece of gear. What that does is all of this stuff here makes noise. There's a little white noise that happens with all of this gear. This effectively shuts that down. So like here when I'm not playing, even though all of this stuff is making noise, you'll notice the yellow light is on, the gate is shut. It's not letting anything out to the amp, so it makes it nice and quiet. If I didn't have it on, you'd hear all this stuff that makes noise. So that's why I have that on. It's just a good safety thing to have on. From there, it goes out and goes to my amp. Let's talk about amps for a second. This is an amp I've used for years, polytone amp. It's actually kind of a jazz amp. Oop, let me turn my reverb off here. Very sturdy, very stable, never have any problems with it. Traveled overseas with it. It's a solid state, doesn't have tubes, but it is very reliable. That's why I got it. It's reliable. It's not going to give me any trouble, and it hasn't for 20 years. It's sitting actually on top of my case, my travel case for my effects pedals. This is also put out by Pedal Train, a good sturdy case. I've traveled with that when I do my effects pedals. Sometimes, if I'm traveling internationally, I don't necessarily want a big old obvious case that's carrying my pedals, which look very valuable. So I just buy a good old junky suitcase and a bunch of foam and put my pedals board in that, and a regular old black suitcase that looks everything. And I've traveled to South America many times with it just like that, and nobody ever bothers it. This amp we used a lot for these bonus workshops. I also used this amp, which is made by Visual Sound, a friend of mine, Bob Weil, Visual Sound here in Spring Hill, Tennessee. They're making these amps now. Kind of has a hubcap design, real good honky mid-range sound. I've enjoyed using it. We've used it on a few of the sessions here. Sometimes you won't even be in a place where you're using amps, and so when I record, sometimes I'll go through a pod. It's kind of an older pod here, an amp modeler. These amp modelers are getting better and better all the time, and this is one of the ones that I use quite a bit when I don't have an amp or I'm not using an amp and just want other sounds that I don't have access to. People ask, what kind of amp should I buy? Well, it depends on what style you're going for. If you're a rock player and you want to get that Santana or ZZ Top kind of a sound, you're pretty much locked into having to buy a Marshall amp, because that gets that big, fat, distorted sound. If you're a jazz player, the worst thing in the world for you to buy would be a big old Marshall amp. Voxes, great amps, kind of a British rock sound, a little bit edgier. Fender, Twin, perfect for good, clean, Strat sounding kind of things. Also a little bit of blues things you can do with the Fender amps. Great. Experiment with different amps. Go down to your local music store, plug in, and try different amps. Find one that works for you. Let me talk about how much amp you should buy. I play guitar for a living and have for decades now. And I see no need to buy an amp over about 50 watts. I've played smoky clubs and arenas with amps that didn't have any more than 50 watts on them. I've played arenas with no amp at all and just using my old beat-up Sands amp. And I've played arenas with that, and it just run that right into the sound system. And I've done things like that. If you're buying an amp that has 100 watts or more, and the salesman is talking you into that, you are getting more amp, and that is more for your ego than it has to do with any playing situation that I would find myself in, is to buy an amp with that much power. You just don't need it. That's more for your own ego than for actually buying something that's better. Bigger is not necessarily better with amps. When I go into a studio situation, and let's say I had a huge old amp, all they're going to market is they're going to take a mic of some size. This is a regular old Shure SM57 that I have. They're going to aim it at one cone. So all those other Marshall stack cones that you have are useless. They're going to aim it at one cone generally. So I don't see a need to have a big amp. Other guys may see it differently. I've never needed a big amp for my purposes. What guitar should I buy? Folks always ask me that. If you're a beginner, here's a good rule of thumb. You don't need to drop a couple of $1,000s on a guitar. Don't buy more guitar than you need. I played a $300 foreign-made Strat for years, well into my professional career. In fact, there's this one right here, and played well with it, and did a lot of stuff with it. Now, is that the best guitar? Not by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're just learning, you can buy little Fender packs that come with an amp and a strap and a good solid guitar from a good manufacturer. This is their low end, but it's a good manufacturer. Les Paul's, Gibson's a great manufacturer. There's many good manufacturers. You just want to get something that from a manufacturer that's reputable and has been around a long time. It's easy to be serviced on instruments like that as well. For a skilled player, I would encourage you, don't go overboard. A lot of times when you get above a certain amount, all you're paying for is gold tuners and little inlay and all these pretty little things there. That's what your price is for. Really, the only thing that makes sound on electric is strings, pickups, and a little bit of electronics. Everything else is just added stuff that costs money. So if you're just interested in sound, buy a guitar that has great pickups. Go down to your local music store, plug in, spend an afternoon, trying different instruments, find the ones that work for you. What effects should I buy? If you're just starting out in your effects world, I would buy a delay pedal, I would buy a distortion pedal, and I'd buy a chorus pedal. You can cover just about every sound combination with those three pedals if you're just starting off. So those are good pedals to start out with. Boss makes good solid pedals. Ibanez makes good solid pedals as well. Before I leave you, let me talk you through some of the other aspects of gear. Here's some different picks. For general use, I use a Jim Dunlop, I believe this is a 73. And that's good. It has a little bit of flexibility in it, so I can use that for just average playing. I can strum with it, and I can do single notes. I have other picks that do other things. Sometimes I'll use, if I want to play fast, or I'm going to do in jazz stuff, I'll use a small little Jim Dunlop pick like that. It's thick. It won't give it all. Helps you with speed because you don't have that much pick flopping around. There's other ones that I use too. If I want a jazz sound, I might use this little mandolin pick that I picked up at a store in Columbia, Tennessee. Got a real round sound. Let me see if I can play a little bit with it. I immediately get this jazz sound by just the roundedness of these picks. It's a little Fred Kelly thumb pick. I already talked to you about that in the main presentation. I'll use that sometimes as well. Cables. Cables I use are George L's cables. I'm not an endorser for George L's or anything like that, but these are the best cables you're going to find. I've had this one for probably 5 years. Never had any problems with it. Made it myself with just the raw cable. You cut it off, you slap the end on it, you tie it up, and you tighten this little screw there, and in about 15 seconds, you've got a cable. Okay, and it'll last you forever. No soldering, no wiring, none of that stuff. You cut off the end, you slap it in here, tighten that screw. It does all the puncturing of the sheath of this cable to get down to the wire, and these work great. George L's cables. You'll recognize them. They got this small look to them. Sometimes music stores won't have them. You got to order them online, perhaps. Regular old guitar tuner. I talked to you about that in the other main presentation. Let me talk to you about straps. Straps I've been loving lately are this Fender. It's actually a bass strap, but it's got this neoprene flexibility to it. These straps are going to cost you a few bucks more than a regular strap, but it's worth every penny. All you have to do is plug it up and put it on, and you'll see that little give. You'll go, oh, that's nice. And that's what these straps are great for. You've been using these on all of my guitars lately. Well worth it. What kind of strings do you use? Lately, I've been using these Elixirs, and they're not the only ones that make them. I've used Diodarios before. I just happen to like the slickness of the Elixirs. I've been enjoying that lately. There's some clear tones that I've been using on my acoustic, and I'm kind of liking those. That's new. Anyway, so these are some things that I use, of gear that I use. What about traveling with your instruments? Folks ask me about that. Well, what do you do? Well, I have big old travel cases that I use sometimes, but I hardly ever use those anymore. What I use now is cases like this. This is a case put out by Levy's, a Canadian company. This actually, I can fit 2 guitars in this case. In fact, it's pretty heavy. I think I probably still have all my guitars in here. Got a lot of nice padding in there. There's one electric, about an inch worth of padding there. There's my Godin nylon string. Carries 2 electric guitars in there, so I've got a single one too. It's about the shape of a regular acoustic guitar, and I carry it right on my back, right through security, right into the plane, right up over in the overhead bin. Aren't you worried something's going to happen with that? Not when it's right by me, and so far I've not had a problem with it, and I've traveled overseas in other countries. I've gone through customs in Peru with that case. I've gone through customs in Chile with that case. It's just a whole lot better and doesn't attract attention to itself like a big old travel case would. These are just some thoughts about